Hi, this is Genesis with Sozo Education and Beauty Supply. I just wanted to show you real quick how you can cut down your extreme tips that would come like this or like this and make them be your perfect 2 inches in an easier way. So you can use either the curved tips or the stiletto tips. However, even when this one is cut down to 2 inches, it still doesn't lay nearly as flat as what your stiletto does. This would be an example of what they would look like from the side with either the curve or the square tip, or the stiletto tip. In the end, it's going to be easier for you to do your hand painted nail art, especially on a flatter surface like this, than something that's more curved this way. Because once you've got them all lined up, it's harder to transition from one tip to the next tip and have that curve. So purely preference, but you can do this technique with either the square tips or the stilettos. Once they come out of the package, where's the other one here? The sizing is on the bottom of the tip. And to keep myself organized until I've actually started completing my artwork, I'm actually going to just with a Sharpie marker, let me do this in order. When's the number 3? I'm going to take and put the number up top here. You can always remove this with alcohol or acetone later, but it'll keep you more organized. Then, because of a tip that I got from Brenda Skirmont, this is a quilting ruler, and you can take your tip, apply it with the curved side down, use your tip cutters to go flush up against the ruler and get your exact 2 inches. If you use your tip cutters in this way, you can see the blade is on the right hand side of it. So it would give you a little bit more room to be able to go and file it perfect afterwards. Or you can flip them in the opposite direction and use them this way, and your blade is on that left hand side, so it would then cut it exactly to that 2 inches. And when you file, your tip is going to be slightly shorter than the 2 inches. I'll line up, make sure it's exactly at 2 inches before I cut it. Measure twice, cut once, right? So come in on this side. Once the tip is secured, hold it to keep it from flinging over. And now this one's pretty straight. Normally I tend to cut them a little bit crooked, so I can file this to where it's more perfectly straight. Check to make sure that it's even with the rest of my tips. And now I'm ready to secure my magnet on the back to be able to use with my metalworking board or the display board. Just taking off a little bit of that excess. I'm using a size 12 brush so that I can pick up a larger bead of product right away. Bleed out any of the extra monomer that might be into there to make it a slightly drier bead. Press it down into place. I normally don't have to work with it too much because of it being a drier bead, but I like to make sure that it's contained all in the center. Waiting for the acrylic to dull out just a little bit before I add in my magnet so the magnet won't sink all the way to the bottom. Place that there, press it down into place. Then I'm going to flip this over onto my working board and press it flat. This will make sure that the contact point in between the acrylic and the display board that you're using is going to be completely flat on this side. You do have to hold it there for a little bit longer as the acrylic sets up to make sure that it doesn't pop back up during that process. But this will give you an overall cleaner display at the end when you're going to turn in your work. I prefer adhering my tips to the display board this way because I've used a hot glue gun before, and you have to be careful. For one, if you're going to do that, use a low heat. But then once you put it on the bottom side of it, sometimes it's changed the color of the acrylic paint or the gel that I have on top of it because of the heat coming from that glue on the opposite side. And when I had a face color, it actually made it more yellow and kind of dingy on that other side. And I just spent all this time doing it to go back and redo that whole entire tip would have been a lot of work. So at that point, I just had to turn it in the way that it was because I didn't have time to go back. You also deal with like some of the strings that come from the glue gun. You do have to place the tips like perfectly where you want them to lay. Whereas with these, I can make sure, because these two have the magnets on them, I can make sure that they are, laid up perfectly against each other when I go to turn them in. Or if I want them to be displayed slightly off from each other, you have a little bit more freedom and movement with your design to not only display them in the end, but also to work with them in that process. So hopefully that helps you with your competition mixed media or nail art turn-ins. This is Genesis with Sozo Education and Beauty Supply, wishing you happy competing.